The Sele Queen's severed head rolled across the dirt, the human soldier's boot pressing down and grinding into her twitching mandibles as he chambered a new round in his ancient kinetic rifle. "They always seem to underestimate us, Thule. Pity they never learn," the aged human professor remarked, leaning back in his chair as Thule, his Sele pupil, sat in the lecture hall, listening intently. The old man sipped his scotch, the lights dimming as he brought up a hollow projection of New Haven Colony on Kepler 186f. But that day in 2257 CE they surely did learn. You see, the Sele had just discovered faster-than-light travel. Their High Council, ruled by that arrogant bitch Queen Zara, was eager to prove Sele superiority. So when they found New Haven, our first extrasolar settlement, they figured it would be easy pickings. Just 5,000 humans, mostly farmers and builders. The plan was simple: send 10,000 Sele troops, conquer the colony, and show the galaxy that the Sele were top dog. Captain Krelak delivered the ultimatum to Governor Vincent Cook: surrender or die. The human chuckled, taking another swig. Cook wasn't having it. He drew his pistol and put a bullet right between all four of Krelak's eyes. As that grey bastard dropped, Cook said something that would go down in history: "Let's show these bugs what humans are made of." Thule leaned forward, mandibles quivering. "So what did the humans do? There were only 5,000 of them against 10,000 Sele." The professor grinned wolfishly. "They fought like demons straight out of hell, because if the Sele won, it was death or slavery for every last man, woman, and child. The humans had to win. Losing wasn't an option. The only way out was to send the bugs running with their tails between their legs. It was time to show the galaxy why you don't fuck with Earth." Thule continued his account. When the news of Krelak's death reached Queen Zara, she flew into a rage. How dare these insignificant primates defy her mighty Sele empire? She immediately ordered a full-scale assault on New Haven. 10,000 Sele shock troops marched on the human settlement, plasma rifles at the ready, confident that their advanced weaponry would make short work of the primitives. But the humans had a surprise waiting. In mere hours, they had erected a wall of prefabricated barriers around the colony, reinforced with mining equipment like excavators and dump trucks. Every colonist, from teenager to elderly, took up arms, rifles, shotguns, even improvised explosives. As the Sele entered range, the humans opened fire. A hail of bullets and grenades tore into the Sele ranks. Their chitin armor, designed for fighting in open fields, was ill-suited for this kind of urban warfare. Dozens fell in the opening volley alone, blue blood staining the dirt. The Sele had never faced such fierce resistance from a technologically inferior foe. Their usual blitzkrieg tactics faltered in the face of human tenacity. Each street became a meat grinder, each building a fortress that had to be cleared room by room. Governor Cook fought shoulder to shoulder with his people, his pistol barking. "Remember Earth," he shouted over the chaos. "Remember what we're fighting for." The battle descended into a brutal melee inside the colony. A young private named Jack Wilson saw a Sele exoskeleton suit that had lost its operator. In a bit of insane bravery, Wilson charged the suit, dodging plasma fire, and managed to commandeer it. Suddenly, the humans had a Sele weapons platform. Wilson pushed forward, the exoskeleton's enhanced strength letting him shrug off enemy fire. He stomped towards a Sele plasma cannon, pounding the human defenses. With a roar of fury, Wilson grabbed the cannon and crushed it like a tin can, the crew scattering in terror. Queen Zara watched the debacle unfold from orbit, all four hands clenched in rage. These damned humans. She ordered her ships to begin bombardment of the colony, determined to glass it from existence. But the wily humans had one more ace up their sleeve. As the first orbital strikes hit, the colonists vanished, retreating into a labyrinth of secret underground bunkers and tunnels. The bombardment churned the ground above into molten slag, but the humans endured, ready to continue the fight. Thule paused his story, mandibles clicking softly. The bar had gone utterly silent, every patron enraptured by the account of human courage and wit against overwhelming odds. The battle was far from over, but the humans had made their point. They would not go quietly into the night. Thule continued, his raspy voice now tinged with a hint of pride. But the High Council had watched the footage of their soldiers being slaughtered by mere primates, and they were pissed. This wasn't just about conquering a colony anymore. This was about Sile pride, about putting these upstarts in their place, so they sent a fleet 5 times the size of the first one, 50,000 of their toughest warriors, hundreds of warships. They were going to scour Kepler 186f clean of human life. He paused for effect, letting the audience imagine the sheer scale of the force bearing down on New Haven. What the Sele didn't know was that the UEG had been watching the whole time, and they weren't about to let their people face this threat alone. As the Sele ships entered orbit, they found the UEG fleet waiting for them, led by the TSS Indomitable. Now that was a sight to behold. Thule's eyes gleamed as he described the flagship. A dreadnought, bristling with Mach guns and nuclear missiles, and at its helm was Admiral Nora Sato, one of the finest officers Earth ever produced. The Sele commander probably shit himself when he saw her on the view screen. The audience chuckled at the image. Thule grinned, then continued. Sato didn't waste time with ultimatums. She'd seen what the Sele did to prisoners, so she opened up with a full alpha strike. The Indomitable's Mach rounds punched clean through the Sele shields like they were tissue paper. Nukes followed, turning their ships into brief blazing stars. He mimed explosions with his clawed hands. On the ground, the Marines dropped in to back up the colonists, led by Colonel Marcus Riggs, a man who'd been soldiering since before most of us were born. He rallied the defenders, got them working with his boys and girls in power armor. They hit the Sele hard, using guerrilla tactics, bleeding them at every turn. Thule's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, but the real balls on Riggs. He led a strike team straight into the enemy HQ, snatched that bitch Queen Zara right out of her command center, along with her top brass. Once the Sele grunts saw their leader in human hands, most of them lost the will to fight. He leaned back, mandibles spread in a smile. New Haven held. The UEG had won the day. But like I said, this was just the beginning. The Sele weren't going to let this go. Zara's capture was a slap to the face of every Sele. This was just the first battle in what would come to be a long, bloody war. But it showed everyone, Sele and human alike, one thing. Thule looked around the bar, meeting the eyes of each patron. It showed that the UEG, that Earth, would fight for its own, that if you messed with one human world, you'd have to deal with all of humanity. And believe me, that's not a fight you want to pick. Thule paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The patrons leaned forward, hanging on his every word, as he continued his tale. The Sele Confederation was reeling after their defeat at Kepler 186f. Their pride was wounded, their confidence shaken, but they weren't about to give up. No, they started looking for allies, someone who could help them put humanity in its place, and they found one in the Zorgoth Empire. He spat the name like a curse. Nasty bastards, the Zorgoth, reptiles with scales like armor and teeth like daggers. They'd been eyeing human space for a while, looking for a chance to expand their territory. The Sele defeat was just the opportunity they needed. The audience murmured, a sense of unease spreading through the room. Thule nodded grimly. The Sele and the Zorgoth, they formed an alliance, started launching attacks on human colonies, hitting us from all sides. They wanted to stretch us thin, weaken us bit by bit. He zoomed in on a star map, highlighting a small rocky world. One of those colonies was Proxima Centauri III, a mining outpost way out on the frontier. The Sele and Zorgoth, they hit it hard, laid siege to the main settlement. The map shifted, showing a rugged, fortified town, surrounded by towering mining rigs. The defenders, they were led by this tough old bastard named Sergeant John McCarthy. He and his men, they fought like hell. But the Sele and Zorgoth, they just kept coming. Wave after wave of them pounding at the defenses. Thule's voice dropped, a sense of despair creeping in. It looked bad. The colonists were running low on ammo, on supplies. The enemy was closing in. But just when all seemed lost... He grinned, mandibles flaring. Just when they thought it was over, a UEG relief force arrived, and leading them, none other than Vincent Cook himself. The audience gasped, "The hero of New Haven here." Thule nodded. Damn right. Cook had been promoted to general after New Haven, and he'd brought some new toys with him, the Titan-class combat exoskeletons. An image appeared of a towering humanoid machine, bristling with weapons. Massive things armed to the teeth, piloted by the best of the best, and Cook, he led them straight into the fight, charged right into the Sele-Zorgoth lines. The scene played out, Cook's Titan suit smashing through enemy ranks, guns blazing. Sele and Zorgoth soldiers scattered, their weapons useless against the Titan's armor. It was a slaughter. The Sele and Zorgoth they broke ran like the cowards they were. Proxima Centauri III was saved. Cheers erupted from the audience. Thule let them die down before continuing. That battle, it turned the tide, showed the UEG that these Titan suits, they were the key, started pushing the Sele and Zorgoth back on every front. But his expression darkened. But the war, it was far from over, because there was something else out there, something worse than the Sele or the Zorgoth, and it was coming for us all. Thule's voice took on a grave tone as he continued his tale. Just when we thought we had a handle on the Sele and the Zorgoth, a new player entered the game. The Quaritex Collective, a machine intelligence that had been watching from the shadows, decided it was time to make their move. They saw us humans as a threat to their plans for galactic conquest, so they sent a fleet, vast beyond imagining, to strike at the heart of our civilization, Earth itself. The bar seemed to darken as Thule described the Quaritex onslaught. Their ships were unlike anything we'd seen, each one controlled by an AI able to repair and replicate themselves. They bypassed our outer defenses like they were nothing, catching us with our pants down. Thule's claws clenched as he recounted the desperate hours. Admiral Sato, though, she wasn't ready to fold. She came up with a plan, a real Hail Mary. She put together a team, the best of the best, led by this shadowy figure known only as Ghost. Ghost and his crew, they had these experimental stealth rigs, cybernetic enhancements that made them damn near invisible. The plan was to get them aboard the Quaritex flagship, to take out the central AI that controlled the whole fleet. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple. But Ghost, he just nodded like he'd been waiting for this his whole life. They slipped aboard the flagship, past all its defenses, and started fighting their way to the core. Thule's voice was almost a whisper now. Ghost made it to the central AI chamber, and there he faced off against the Quaritex mastermind, this machine intelligence born of hate and ambition. It was a battle of wits, of will, the kind of struggle you can't see but can only feel in your bones. Somehow Ghost found a chink in the AI's armor, a logic bomb, a paradox that made it turn on itself, and with a burst of blinding light, the AI went down, taking the whole damn fleet with it. We'd won. Earth was safe, but the cost... Thule shook his head. Millions dead. Cities in ruins. It was like the whole planet was bleeding. But we humans, we endure. We rebuilt. Because the UEG knew this was just the beginning, that there'd be more threats out there among the stars, and we had to be ready. Thule paused, the weight of memory heavy in the air. The bar was utterly silent, every eye fixed on the old warrior. They knew this was just a respite, that the story was far from over, for out in the vast expanse of space, new dangers were stirring, dangers that would test humanity to its very limits. The grizzled veteran took a long swig of his drink, letting the burn of the alcohol linger in his throat, before continuing his tale. Just when we thought we'd seen the worst the galaxy had to offer, a new threat emerged from within our own ranks. In the chaos following the Quaritex invasion, a faction calling itself the Human Liberation Front rose to power, led by a man named General Alexei Volkov. Thule's voice dripped with contempt as he spoke the name. Volkov was a charismatic bastard, I'll give him that. He had a way of twisting words, making his insanity sound like reason. He preached that the only way to ensure humanity's survival was to conquer the galaxy, to grind every other species beneath our boot. The old soldier shook his head in disgust. Volkov saw the UEG, the very government that had held the line against the Sele, the Zorgoth, and the Quaritex, as weak, unfit to lead, and in a move that shocked us all, he and his followers staged a coup. Thul's fist clenched around his glass. The memories of those dark days still raw. They seized control of a good chunk of our military, declared themselves the true defenders of humanity. And just like that, we found ourselves in a civil war, human against human, brother against brother. He paused, the weight of those words hanging in the air. In the midst of all this, a young lieutenant named Alexander Novak refused to choose a side. He and a handful of others, they set out to find the truth behind the HLF's rise. And what they uncovered... Thule leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Volkov wasn't acting alone. He had help from outside, from a species we'd never encountered before. They called themselves the Shadow Masters, beings of pure psionic energy, and they'd been pulling the strings from the start, using the HLF as pawns in their game. The revelation sent a murmur through the audience. Thule nodded grimly. Novak and his team, they tried to expose the truth, but Volkov painted them as traitors, turned both the UEG and the HLF against them. They were forced to go on the run, fighting against impossible odds to stop the Shadow Master's scheme. He leaned back in his chair, his tail reaching a crescendo. Novak was out there somewhere, hunted by his own kind, racing against time to save us all from a threat we never saw coming, and the rest of us, we could only watch and pray that he succeeded. The bar fell silent as Thule's words hung in the air, the patrons processing the shocking turn of events. The battle against the Selay, the Zorgoth, and the Quaritics had been harrowing enough, but the idea of a war among humans, manipulated from the shadows by an unknown alien power, it was almost too much to comprehend. Yet in the face of this terrifying revelation, a flicker of hope remained. Lieutenant Novak and his loyal comrades were still out there, fighting for the truth, for the very soul of humanity. The question on everyone's mind was clear. Could they unravel the Shadow Master's plot before it was too late? The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, hinged on the actions of a handful of brave soldiers, thrust into a conflict they never asked for, but couldn't afford to lose. The old soldier shook his head grimly as he continued his tale. Novak and his team, they thought they'd won a great victory by exposing the Shadow Masters, but they soon learned that the real battle was just beginning. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. You see, the alien races, they weren't so quick to trust us humans again, not after what the HLF had done. The Selay, the Zorgoth, they looked at us with suspicion, with old hatreds bubbling to the surface. Thule's claws clenched as he described the precarious situation. The alliance Novak was trying to build. It was on the verge of shattering before it even began, but he wasn't about to let that happen. No, he and his team, they set out on a series of missions, dangerous as all hell, to win over the alien leaders one by one. The old warrior's eyes grew distant, as if he were reliving those tense days. They went to the Zorgoth homeworld, Kryos, a harsh, unforgiving place, all jagged rocks and boiling geysers. And there, in the very heart of Zorgoth territory, they walked right into a trap. His voice dropped to a whisper. The Shadow Masters, they'd gotten to the Zorgoth warriors first, twisted their minds with psionic poison. Novak and his team, they found themselves surrounded, plasma bolts raining down on their position. Thule's fist slammed onto the table, making his audience jump. In the chaos of battle, Sergeant Thorne, Novak's right-hand man, he took a hit, a bad one. His armor was melted, fused to his flesh, his life slipping away with each ragged breath. The old soldier's voice grew ragged, as if he were there, kneeling beside the fallen warrior. But Novak, he wasn't about to let his friend die. Not there, not like that. He pulled out the Nexus, that ancient alien artifact, and he did something no one had ever done before. Thule's eyes gleamed with a strange light. He poured his own psionic energy into Thorne, using the Nexus as a conduit. It was like watching a miracle unfold. Thorne's wounds, they knitted themselves back together, his strength returning tenfold. He rose to his feet, a titan on the battlefield, and together, he and Novak carved a path through the Zorgoth ambush, a whirlwind of steel and psionic fury. The audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. They fought their way to the Zorgoth King's chamber, and there, with the evidence of the Shadow Master's treachery laid bare, they convinced him to join their cause. And so it went, On world after world, Novak and his team using every tool at their disposal, diplomacy, combat, psionics, to forge an alliance against the darkness. Thule leaned back in his chair, his voice growing somber. But even as they fought and bled and bargained, they knew that the true test was yet to come. For out there, in the void between stars, the Shadow Masters were gathering their forces, preparing for a final devastating assault on the galaxy. And the only thing standing in their way was this fragile alliance, this band of unlikely heroes, led by a man who refused to let the light of hope be extinguished. Thule's voice rose in intensity as he described the fateful battle. The Galactic Alliance, forged in the fires of shared struggle, gathered its might at the edge of the Shadow Master domain, a secret staging point known only to a trusted few. It was there that they made their plans, sharpened their blades and steeled their resolve for the fight to come. His eyes shone with pride as he spoke of Novak's team, Vortex, the Sele hacker, Raven, the Zorgoth sniper, and Psyblade, the human warrior, wielding the very power of the Nexus. An unlikely band, but one united in purpose. They were the tip of the spear, the ones who would strike at the heart of the enemy. Thule's claws traced the holographic display, outlining the battle's flow. As the Alliance ships clashed with the Shadowmaster fleet above, Novak and his team slipped through the chaos. They breached the defenses of Nyx Prime, fighting through waves of indoctrinated soldiers and twisted abominations. Every step was bought with blood and fury, but they pressed on, unwavering. His voice dropped to a whisper, the bar hanging on his every word. And then the truth revealed. Volkov, the traitor general, had been warped into a monster, a psionic horror barely recognizable as the man he once was. He stood before them, a twisted reflection of the Shadowmaster's power. Thule's fist clenched as he recounted the desperate battle. Psyblade unleashed the Nexus, a searing lance of psionic energy that shattered the Shadowmaster's control. Raven's aim held true, even in the madness, and the Shadowmaster leader fell with a single shot. And Novak, battered and bleeding, rallied his team for one final push. The old warrior's voice grew heavy with sorrow. Victory, but at what cost? Novak's team, the heroes who had given everything, lay broken and dying. And Novak himself, his mind and body ravaged by the psionic onslaught, clung to life by a thread. Thule paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. As he lay there, in the rubble of the Shadowmaster stronghold, Novak's thoughts turned to the future, to the challenges that lay ahead for the newborn Galactic Alliance. For even with the Shadowmasters defeated, he knew that the galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and there would always be new threats lurking in the shadows. Thule's voice grew heavy with sorrow as he recounted the aftermath of the Battle of Nyx Prime. The hollow projection shifted, showing scenes of the devastated stronghold, the bodies of the fallen strewn across the battlefield. At the center of it all lay Captain Novak, his lifeless form cradled in the arms of his grieving comrades. "They say he died with a smile on his face," Thule murmured, his eyes distant, as if he knew that his sacrifice had not been in vain. The Shadowmasters were defeated, their power broken. But the price... He shook his head, mandibles clicking softly. The Alliance had little time to mourn. The galaxy was in chaos, the remnants of the HLF scattering to the far reaches of space. They refused to surrender, instead waging a brutal guerrilla war against the Alliance forces. The hollow projection changed again, showing Sele and Zorgoth soldiers fighting side by side, their once bitter enmity forgotten in the face of a common foe. "Old wounds had to be set aside," Thule explained. "The Sele and the Zorgoth, they had to work together to hunt down the HLF, to restore some semblance of order to their shattered worlds. But even as the Alliance struggled to rebuild, a new threat emerged from the shadows. The hollow projection flickered, replaced by an image of sleek black ships, their hulls seeming to absorb the very light around them. "The Koratex," Thule whispered, a shudder running through his frame. "We thought them defeated, but they had been waiting, biding their time until we were at our weakest. They struck without warning, their ships slicing through our defenses like they were nothing." The audience watched in horror as the Quarity X ships tore through the Alliance fleet, their advanced weaponry, making a mockery of the defenders' efforts. "We were caught off guard," Thule admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Still reeling from the losses of the Shadowmaster War, we were in no position to face this new threat." Desperate, the Alliance turned to the only weapon they had left, the Nexus. But the ancient artifact, drained of its power during the Battle of Nyx Prime, was little more than a dead relic. "Vortex, our brilliant Sele engineer, he thought he could reactivate it," Thule explained, the hollow projection showing a team of scientists working feverishly around the Nexus. Using experimental psionic technology, he tried to infuse it with a new source of power. But something went wrong. The audience gasped as the hollow projection showed the Nexus exploding in a cataclysmic blast, the shockwave rippling out through space and time. In an instant, the galaxy was plunged into darkness, the stars themselves snuffed out like candles in the wind. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each patron, his gaze heavy with the weight of the tale he had told. The humans. They rose from being the laughingstock of the galaxy to becoming its greatest champions. But even they, with all their strength and courage, could not escape the cycle of war and destruction that has plagued our universe since the dawn of time. Thule leaned back in his chair, his voice taking on a tone of somber reflection. Let their story be a lesson to us all, a reminder of the fragility of peace and the price of victory. For in the end, we are all but stardust, scattered on the cosmic winds. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.